Hello and welcome to polyplane.com. Today we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about undo and redo, and also spend a little bit of time on history. Now, if you've ever used any sort of computer program, you've probably had to hit Command-Z or Control-Z depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. This action is just to undo a mistake, or maybe you thought about doing something a different way, so you decided to undo your typing or undo a brush stroke. So what happens is you're going along an original path and you're making your actions to do whatever you're doing, and then you undo, and then you're going kind of backwards on that path. Well, what happens if you're working on something and you undo and then you start changing things a different way? What this does is creates a new path of actions. Essentially, what you're doing is you're creating a fork in the road of what you did and now what you're doing. The only problem with this model is it creates a blockade, if you will. And what this blockade prevents you from doing is redoing anything you've done on your original path of action. So you can undo all you want getting behind this fork in the road, but then anything you redo will always go on the new path up until the point that you stop taking actions. Now, this is a little bit of an abstract concept, so let me show you what I mean in Rhino. So what I'm showing here is a curve and a few potential paths you might be able to take this curve on. Maybe you want to extrude it a half an inch and then fillet it, or maybe you want to extrude it 1 inch and fillet it, or 2 inches and fillet it. Well, if you go down this path of saying, okay, I want to take this curve and extrude it out 1 inch, and then I want to give it some fillet, and this is what you wind up with, you'd be happy. But oh wait, you actually wanted it to be 2 inches tall. So you might have to undo this to get back to the curve and then extrude it up 2 inches. Now, if you were to try to hit in Rhino, it's Control Y to redo the fillets, well, the computer wouldn't know what you mean because you're on this new path of going this way. You would have to re-execute the fillet command itself versus just relying on the redo button, which is if you right click on this or if you hit Control Y. So that's a basic idea of how undo sort of flows. I want to show you one other little facet of the undo, and that is the settings for it. So there's this little render globe here. If you right click on it and then go down to General, under Undo, you can set the minimum number of undos. So this number indicates how many undos Rhino will remember before it starts to forget the very first thing in the sequence of undos. The other thing here is how much memory you can allocate to your undos. Say if you're working with a really big model and it has a lot of bits and pieces, well, your computer has to remember all that stuff, so you have to allocate a certain amount of space to your memory in order for that to work. So I usually just keep it at the default of 100 megabytes. I don't usually undo that often. I might undo maybe 10 steps maximum, but I like to keep it nice and large of a number just in case I get really off track at a certain point. The other thing I want to talk about is history. So I have 3 ellipses here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to loft these. And the reason I did it that way versus just extruding one is because I want, in a loft, you have control curves that define the profile. So check this out. If I turn on the points for this curve, with record history on down here at the bottom, if I select this curve and I pull it out, it's actually going to modify the surface that was generated from the loft. So this is sort of a workaround to that whole undo redo fork in the road, is recording your history. But you have to be really careful because it's really easy to break the history. So say I were to redo this again, and just to make sure I'm just selecting the curve, and now I'm going to rotate that to show you how that modifies it again. Okay, so the history is still active because it updated the model. But what if I were to take this and scooch over a copy of it, and then I did something funky, like I turned on the control points for the actual surface, and I move one of those around, and maybe this one too. So now it's much different than what the original curve that generated. So if I go and I rotate this curve, you'd assume since record history is still recording that it would update the model. Well, it doesn't because you changed what was recorded. So you have to be really careful when you use that kind of a tool because it's easy to break the link between what was recorded and what was doing the recording. So on this one, that history record is still available, so I can then modify that as I need to. That's how you can use history to update your models and get around the whole undo redo fork in the road. If you type history in Rhino, You get a few little settings up here. If it says record equals yes, I know this sounds really self-evident, but that means that it's recording. And the other one that you want to do is make sure that lock is set to no, because if you set the lock to yes, hit enter, anything that's been recorded, so the surface is now locked. Even if I type unlock, it's not going to let me select it because it's locked in the history. So I have to type history and then click unlock to make it no, hit enter, and then you'll be able to select your surface. So that's a brief overview of the undo, redo, and history tools. I hope that you keep these in mind because they're extremely powerful if you use them right. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.